Well, we're here, honored today to have Cameron McIntyre with us, who's an amazing decoy maker and artist that lives here on the Eastern Shore. It's mid-June of 2024, and the heat's cranking up, and it's a good day to talk about hunting decoys in the winter. Maybe it'll cool us down a little bit.
Maybe.
So Cameron, I've known you for a few years. I know you live in Accomack County here on the Eastern Shore, but are you from this area, or?
No, I'm a come here. Always will be, but at least my boys were born on the Eastern Shore. But no, I'm from, I grew up down in Beaufort, South Carolina.
Okay. And when did you move up to this area, roughly?
I moved up here in August of 1989.
Oh, wow. So
right before the brutal winter of '89.
Very nice. Yeah, so your decoys are beautiful,
well,
by the way.
Thank you.
And your artwork is amazing. I'm very enjoy looking at it and seeing your work, but also very interested in kind of how you got to this point in your career. When did you start making decoys? Was it when you were younger, or?
Yeah, I mean, you know, I grew up down in Beaufort and just lived in a little house, probably less than 1,000 square foot house in a little neighborhood. Everybody today seems like they have to live in a big mansion or something, but just grew up in a little neighborhood there, and my father used to take me duck hunting when I was a kid, and we'd have to drive, you know, out in the country to do that. We actually hunted in a place that's called the Ace Basin, which it's a big protected area now. I think it's about 300,000 acres. So it was a really interesting place to grow up hunting. And I just had developed a passion for duck hunting more than anything else. And we hunted with, the decoys that we used were cork LL Bean decoys. And I didn't really, wasn't that fascinated by those cork decoys really, but as I got older, my father came on a hunting trip one time up to Cambridge, Maryland, and brought back a whole car full of old decoys. Ooh. And so never thought about making a decoy until that, but as soon as he came home with those decoys, I was just so overwhelmed and fascinated by them that I thought, you know, I want to try to see if I could make one of these. Yeah. Didn't know anybody that carved, had no idea there was contemporary decoy carvers. I mean, so the first thing I did is I remember seeing an ad in the back of a Ducks Unlimited magazine for like a carve your own bird kit, and it was a little flying duck, and they sent you a little knife and all that. And anyway, the first thing I did was lay my hand open at the kitchen table, but anyway, that was what got me interested in wanting to carve a decoy.
Did you make any back then that you eventually hunted over as a kid, or?
Well, not at that early stage. So what ended up happening is so after my father brought those first old decoys home, he got really interested in collecting them, and so he found out there were decoy shows. And so he went to a show one time, and I actually went with him up to Virginia Beach. That was in 1978 or 9, I think it was 79. And at that show, I got to meet Grayson Chesser, and I think Mark McNair may have been there, but there were people that actually made a living carving decoys, you know. And so at that show, I remember I bought some cedar, because I mean, I didn't even know what kind of wood to use. I had a buck knife and a coping saw. And really back then, I mean, I had no woodworking ability at all. I mean, zero. I was good at art and drawing. I was kind of obsessed with that. But in terms of having any woodworking background, or I didn't know anyone who was a woodworker, so I was, you know, in my own little bubble down there and didn't know what I was doing.
Scratch.
Yeah.
Yeah. Wow.
Yeah. So anyway, yeah, Grayson at the next show that I saw him at, he cut out like a half a dozen teal bodies and heads, and said, you know, hey, you know, why don't you take these home?
Oh, cool.
And so that was how I really got started making decoys. And I did, I hunted with a couple of those, and then I started making, with my limited knowledge at the time, I did start making decoys to hunt with when I was, 12, 13 years old.
Wow.
So.
Neato.
And they were not very good.
They probably worked though, didn't they? I mean,
Yeah, I'm sure they worked.
Yeah. I remember the first time I shot probably a buffle head over a black duck that I had made that was like a cereal box painted brown.
Right.
With a little matchbox on top for a head.
Yeah.
But that was a cool feeling, I know, as a younger kid, like I'd done something. Of course, a clump of mud might have done the same that day, but hey, in my mind, it was awesome.
That's right. Yeah. And then, you put a decoy out on the water, and you just, you never know how it's going to swim in the tide, or, how the wind's going to affect it. And, you do get a completely different perspective watching them out on the water. So that whole process is, it's pretty fascinating, really.
Well, obviously, since then, you've made a lot of decoys. Who were maybe some of the decoy makers that have kind of been influential in either your way of thinking or your style or just your process? Or
Right. Well, going back to when I was young, I mean, I remember, we had a whole house full of old decoys, and so I do remember that some of the ones we had some really early Mason Premier, like their slope breast, snaky head Masons, different than.
Right.
I mean, really unique looking Masons, not what you typically think of as a Mason. These are the early, probably hand carved ones, and I can remember the paint on those. We had a couple canvasbacks and a Drake mallard and a pintail, and they weren't really an early influence on me, but my earliest influences, obviously, Grayson was a major influence on me. As a contemporary, and then he introduced me to Mark McNair. He was another big influence on me. Early on, I sort of followed in Grayson's footsteps till I was probably 16, 17 years old. But I was also influenced by a guy, Walter Brady, who I really think is Eli Dowdy from Hog Island. Even before I knew where Hog Island was, I didn't know anything about, about decoys. I just remember seeing his decoys and really was attracted to them. They seemed to me to have, some sort of mysterious quality about them. I mean, they didn't really look like a goose. They didn't really look like his black ducks don't look that much to me like a real black duck, whereas a cob, does. I mean, I can look at a cob goose or brant absolutely and say, boy, that looks just like a goose on the water. But the Dowdy birds, the Eli Dowdy, they had a quality about them. I guess it was like a timeless quality that I couldn't really put my finger on. And he was a big influence on me. And then the Caines brothers, who are these carvers from South Carolina, I was surrounded by those in my house, and when you look at something every day of your life, it sort of, and especially when you're attracted to it as well. I mean, because we had decoys by other makers who didn't influence me at all. We had some Joe Lincolns, and we had a little bit of everything, but I've never been influenced by a Joe Lincoln decoy. But
well, it sounds like a really unique opportunity to grow up seeing all those different styles and like bona fide decoys that had survived, and that's neat,
Yeah, no, it was neat, and when I was carving back then, and painting, that wasn't really cool with my friends that I hung out with.
Right, sure.
And so I didn't even sort of let on that I was doing that. It was like my little secret life, because we were into our trucks and boats and all that, and painting and carving was something I just kind of kept in the closet.
Right. Yeah. So you I know, in addition to carving your own decoys, you've been in and gotten involved with repairing old decoys, and I know some that are important decoys that, only a couple people in the country may be trusted with. But has that influenced you being able to kind of get up close and personal and meet some of those decoys and how they're made? Because I know when you're trying to repair them, you got to figure out, it's not like you're just painting something flat. You got to figure out kind of how it's put together and make it mesh, I would assume. Is that
right? Oh, well, absolutely. I would say that above and beyond all the influences that I've had, doing the restoration work taught me more than any of it. Because you can almost, to get good at doing the restoration work, and I would tell people, the Illinois River birds are not my specialty. I don't know those birds well enough, but when I was doing my repairs, I was doing lots of Ira Hudsons and Cobbs and Dudleys and Wards and Gus Wilsons and Verities. And you have, especially we'll take Ira Hudson. He had 30 different styles over his life, and a bill that you would put on an early Ira Hudson blue bill is different than what you would put on a later one, and
right.
So you have to know all these different styles, and then somebody might send you an unknown maker bird that had the bill missing or the head missing, and you have to try to anticipate, based on the style of the body, I wonder what this head would have looked like, and so you get to sort of live vicariously through that carver. And but yeah, with the repairs, just matching the wood grain is important. Like if you have a bill that's broken off and the grain's oriented a certain direction in the head, you've got to orient the grain a certain direction in the bill. And then you learn about texture, because texture is something that I'm really interested in, and it's very important. That when I'm done with a repair, I want you to be able to see that texture that's on the rest of the bird, but you need to be able to feel it too, because it all just needs to blend together.
I found meeting decoys, and it is a very tactile thing. Most everyone, when you get talking, they're looking at a decoy, they start rubbing it, don't they?
It's like irresistible.
Yeah.
I smell. Grayson's nickname for me used to be Sniffy, because I just, it's crazy, but you pick them up, you rub on them, you smell them, you just, it is a tactile thing.
When you're, to me, it's kind of a big mystery, and I'm sure it's a lot of trial and error, but just those patinas and paint patinas that develop over the years because of the environment the bird's in, and that must be challenging but fulfilling when you can kind of get that matched up too. I'm assuming that takes a lot of trying different things, and something works, and then you're like, yay.
Oh, it's madness. And I'm positive that there's certain patinas that can't be duplicated. For instance, you get a bird that has just black, just the color black, and the way that black can change over the years, it is the hardest color to match by far.
Wow.
People would think, that's got to be the easiest, but it is the hardest paint, because it can be chalky and dry, and and then and all colors can have different looks depending on the way you turn them in the light, but there's something about the way the light catches the black, hard color to match. And sometimes less is more. You might be able to just match it with just black right out of the can and don't do anything to it. And then other times, nothing you can dream up in your imagination can seem to duplicate it.
Yeah. Wow. Really, again, when it's successful, I'm sure it's a good feeling.
It is. I don't do too many restorations anymore, but every now and then I'll see one that I just can't turn it down, like a Dudley with no bill. It's like it needs to be brought back to life.
Right.
And if you can do a good job on it, it is satisfying. I feel like I'm kind of honoring Lee Dudley and all those other birds. I fixed a lot of decoys even after I gave it up. I didn't want to fix them, didn't need to fix them, but I felt like, you know, I should do this.
Yeah, out of respect for the
Right.
bird and the maker. Very
Yep.
neat. Well, shift gears a little bit, Cameron. I know you've made a lot of decoys over the years. Are there any interesting places that you know your decoys have wound up geographically, or I'm sure there's some all around the country, but other countries?
Yeah, they're all over the place. I mean, I think a few of them have made it to England. I don't know.
Across the pond.
Yeah, I know some of my paintings are in Singapore, which is kind of
Wow.
unusual. But yeah, I mean, the decoys, you know, the different places that they reside. I mean, I have collectors all over the country that have them. And you know, the ones that are special to me is when you get someone that has a great collection of old decoys and has one or two of mine in there on the shelf with the really good ones. I mean, that's a special feeling.
Kind of neat, because in a way, you know, part of you's traveling with those birds, or at least that's the way I think about it, you know, from the Eastern Shore to out into the world.
Right.
Well, you mentioned paintings. So are you involved in other types of art? And if so, you know, is that a fairly new thing, or have you been doing that for a long time as well?
Well, no, I do landscape paintings as well. I mean, you know, when I was young, I guess my aspiration was to be a painter.
Oh, cool.
I wasn't quite sure, you know, there's a million different types of paintings that you can do, and I thought I was gonna, you know, be a bird painter, I guess. But then what changed all that is, you know, the more I studied art, which I did go to the University of South Carolina for a couple of years, majoring in art, but then I left there and studied with a painter down in Charleston, South Carolina, named William McCullough. And that was at the Gibbs Museum. And then after being exposed to all sorts of different paintings, and then traveling to different museums, that's something that has been a big influence on me, is going to, you know, whether it's the Metropolitan or the Boston Museum of Fine Arts or the Freer Gallery over in Washington. And I've been to those places like dozens of times. And seeing a landscape painting that has, you know, no people, no birds, just a pure landscape, you know, you're kind of forced to just look at the pure nature, because there's nothing in there to distract your, you know, your mind. I mean, there's no, you know, you think there's no story there when you see something that doesn't have little birds flying around or a boat or whatever, but there's a big story there if you can spend the time to make the connection with the painting. I've
noticed, I've seen a couple of your paintings that are marsh type settings, you can tell you've been out there with the light, because you always, to me it feels like that moment of sunset, or that moment when things are slowing down or picking up, depending on the setting you've done. And hearing you say that, it makes a lot of sense now, because I feel like you see that duck hunting a lot, where everything's quiet, nothing's happening, and you're just taking in that moment and capturing that and putting it down there for other people to capture is pretty cool.
Well, thank you.
Yeah.
And I mean, as you know, I mean, you work on the water and you've, you know, hunted your whole life. I mean, duck hunters are crazy. I mean, there is no reason to get up out of a warm bed at 4 o'clock in the morning when it's freezing cold and go out in the Chesapeake Bay and risk your life. And then when you're out there at that time of day, you know, you see so many incredible things. I mean, you know what it's like over on the Bayside when it's blowing 35 out of the northwest, and you got to beat across a bay somewhere to get up in a little lee. And you know, if you're a good duck hunter, you get there way before legal shooting time, and you get set up, and then you sit there and you know, you see those colors and you watch the world, you know, come alive.
It's humbling.
And then, you know, duck hunting, you can have a kind of a fast and furious duck hunt occasionally, but most of the time you're going to spend a lot of time sitting there looking at empty skies. And so you have a lot of time to take that in.
Yeah.
And I think that's been a huge help for me versus someone who just goes out trying to find something to paint.
Specifically to find it,
You know,
right.
I've done that a few times, and I don't like that at all.
Right.
You know, the paintings that are successful for me are the ones when I just remember it in my head, and I'll make a drawing, and then I may go back and visit the place to get some of the details, if you want to call them that, some of the compositional elements. But it's all about your memory and your imagination, and that to me is what great painting is about. It's about you know, turning your back. I mean, memorizing nature to a certain degree, but realizing that the things that you need to make a great painting are up here, because just going out and painting something that's right in front of you, that's may not end up being a work of art.
Right. Interesting. Yeah. You've got that down.
Well, I don't.
I feel emotion from all your paintings I've looked at in terms of those types of moments, and I really like that. I find solace in it.
Well, thank you. I appreciate that.
On a different note, I know you've waterfowl hunted extensively. Are there any cool places that are different from like the Mid-Atlantic that you've really had some good waterfowl hunting experiences that, you know, were different from our area?
Yeah, I mean, there's a lot of them, and hunting to me, I don't know about you, but hunting to me is something that's so special that, I mean, the last thing I would ever do would be to go online and tell someone about my hunting trip. I mean, I just don't do that. And some people call it sandbag and whatever. You call it whatever you want to, but to me, hunting is just a personal thing that I do for myself. But I have been so many wonderful places and met so many great people that
it is a lot about people and different ways of doing things that are kind of fun to learn too, aren't they?
Right.
Like I've never hunted like the Rocky Coast of Maine. I think that would be neat because it's a different, you know, eider hunting or something where it's just totally alien to me, but it's dangerous. And, you know, I figure those guys know what they're doing and would never had a chance to do it yet, maybe one day, but yeah.
Well, yeah, I did that with Grayson a couple times.
Oh, okay.
We hunted up in Maine on the coast there. And then my wife is from Maine, and so I've done some other, I've goose hunted up there, even though they said, oh, you know, we have some geese, but you can't kill them. Well, you know, you can kill geese in Maine.
Yeah. Takes the Eastern Shoreman to go up there, show them how it's done.
Right. But you know, I've been up to Canada, both Ontario, Saskatchewan, Alberta. I get a big kick out of trying to go to some of the same areas where great decoy makers lived, and because history to me, you know, when I'm out in my shop carving, I mean, I can feel the presence of those makers. I mean, I absolutely can feel it.
Yeah.
And so I thought it was important to go see some of those places and hunt there. And so I was really fortunate one time I got to go up and hunt at the Long Point Company, which is a famous hunting club in Ontario, at Long Point, Ontario. That was a wonderful experience. They still use 100-year-old wooden decoys, and took some of my decoys up there and hunted with them. And I've hunted some other famous hunting grounds up there that I won't disclose, but had great shooting with good friends. Hunted out west some, out in the Dakotas and different places, and the Illinois River. It's another place I went to and hunted at some of the clubs where, you know, the early makers, Graves and Walker and those guys hunted right there. And so yeah, that's been something to kind of dream about when I get older.
It adds to the whole, I guess, context of the decoys and the
Yep.
Now, I know I've gotten to know a couple of your sons, or your two sons, a little bit over the last couple of years, and I know I love taking my kids hunting, but mainly fishing, it turns out. They like fishing more than anything. Do you feel that's important to be able to kind of hand some of those things down that you know, really shaped you as a person? Or?
Oh, to me, that was top priority. I mean, the biggest priority in my life, other than trying to keep my wife happy, which is easy to do, thankfully, was to, you know, take both of my boys out in nature from an early age and show them what it's all about. Because you know, everything that we've created, especially very recently, is it's all fake. I mean, it's a fantasy, and nature is what's real.
It's real.
And one day it's going to all come back to
to
the real thing. Yeah. But no, you know, I took them hunting. I remember when they were young, I gave them a BB gun, and I told them, I said, you know, you can go out and you can shoot any bird you want. I don't care what kind it is. I said, but you're going to eat it.
You're going to eat it.
And then when you shoot it one time, you know, unless it's a dove or something that you're allowed to shoot, that's it.
You get one shot.
And what they took from that is they learned those birds. I mean, they knew a goldfinch, and they knew a cedar waxwing, and they knew all the birds. And then after they've done that, you know, they know that bird, and they're not going to shoot that bird. They didn't want to shoot that bird, and you know, they may even want to protect that bird. You know. So
you learn there's a lot of good life lessons in the duck marsh and the boat fishing, and I mean, you know, not everything always goes great, and being able to handle that and pivot is an important skill. So
I mean, you know, giving a young kid a gun with adult supervision, I mean, it teaches them so many things. I mean, you realize how fragile life is when you shoot something. I mean, because you know yourself, I mean, you can shoot a goose flying by at 40 yards and it just is instantly dead. And then you realize, wow, that's really
it's
powerful.
It's a real thing, powerful,
this is a serious consequence here. And
I love that teaching the kids too that, you know, then when you're eating that food, you know, it's not coming from a grocery store. Food doesn't come from a grocery store. It's coming from somewhere, even the food at the grocery store. And when you can kind of provide for yourself a little bit and do that full experience, I feel like that is a good thing to do, even if, you know, we don't obviously do it every day to get by.
But yeah, that's what it's all about. Yep. And yeah, I've been very fortunate that both of my boys developed a passion for the outdoors, and especially for eating and cooking the birds. And you know, they know how to do all that stuff. I mean, they can drag a deer out of the woods, gut it out, butcher it, wrap it, cook it. I mean, Miles he is an unbelievable cook. If you ever get a chance for him to cook for you, he is a fantastic cook.
Neat.
And
good skills.
Very good skills, yep.
Well, Cameron, is there anything else that you think, you know, you'd want to discuss or anything, or kind of covered a lot of ground?
I think so. Yeah.
I really appreciate you taking the time to sit down and talk. We've had some nice conversations sometimes at halftime of football games when our boys were playing together and stuff. But I really enjoyed talking to you, and it's given me a new appreciation for your decoys and your art. I already had a big appreciation for it, but I'm looking forward to looking at some of them kind of in a new light after talking to you today. So thank you.
Great. Yes, sir. Thank you.
Appreciate it.
All right.